But in overtime, we had the ball down 2 and called our last time out with like 12 seconds left. And we drew up a play. We're going to get, come off this ball screen. And they came out in the zone. And we didn't tell our kids what to do if it was a zone. And so we pass it around, throw up a wild shot. We lose by 2. But I've always remembered how Del Curry in that game against us hadn't played zone the entire game. And that situation went to it. And as a coach, I learned a lot because I did not prepare our guys. Like, if they come out in the zone, we do this. If their man, do this.
Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and we're back with a new Off the Beaten Path, a podcast for basketball coaches living in obscurity, working in obscurity, and even those who have made it out of obscurity, maybe with state championships.
Hey, it's a place for storytelling. We tend to have some of those be true, learning, connecting, reconnecting, and food for thought, and my favorite, food for the belly. And we got a state champ here today, as Coach Searle said, and we'll let Searle go ahead and do the introductions.
All right, Coach Matt Hixenbaugh joining us from the Mount Pisgah Patriots. Coach, welcome. It feels like ages ago, but congrats on that state championship. That's kind of a highlight, but it leads us into a chance to talk hoops.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I said any chance you can get to talk hoops, I'm up for it and look forward to our conversation today.
That's what I told Corey, because I got a chance to catch up with you. We'd never met before, but prior to broadcasting the state final at Mount Pisgah and Holy Innocents Single A Private in Georgia, I got a chance to catch up with you, talk hoops, and hear about your philosophy, your path. And I said, we got to get this guy on the podcast. So it's some off the beaten path with a culmination that's a big trophy. So we can't wait to hear all the steps, Coach.
Yeah, that's great. I look forward to it because, basketball, I think is the, as an educator, basketball, you can learn more from it than anything you do. And I love learning about it and talking about it. And it's been a passion of my life for as long as I can remember.
Well, we've had a lot of guys on here that have played junior college, NAIA, and Division II, and have talked about their experiences. And we even did a whole podcast of a D3 program at LaGrange College. Your path kind of follows that. And I know Searle was so excited because of Coach Edwards at Washington U being a guy that he kind of follows, and he even listed him as 3 or 5 of the best coaches out there in the country, no matter the level. So go ahead, jump us in. I know you want to tell us a little bit about your high school before you got there, but kind of give us the playing part before we get to the coaching part.
So, as a player, I grew up in Central Illinois in Taylorville, Illinois. And was fortunate to play in a town and environment where basketball was important. Taylorville has a long history of Johnny Orr was a graduate from Taylorville, and they won the state championship in 1944 at 45-0. And they are it is still a big deal around town.
Did they have one of the signs as you drive into town saying?
Without a doubt. Yeah. And it was always a proud moment growing up when, Johnny Orr was coaching at Michigan, and then Iowa State, when they had mentioned, his career was always cool when you're a little kid watching games on ESPN. And then when he'd get back home, it was really neat to see how you can leave a small town and have an impact through basketball. And so that's really one of my first memories. And I was fortunate to play for a great coach in high school, who played for Dolph Stanley, who was the coach of the Johnny Orr team. And so I think it's amazing when I'm a history teacher by trade, but we grew up, and some of the things that we did in high school was the same things that they did in the 40s. They pick and roll offense with tipping zone on defense, which was modern at the time. We still did it, but I think it's really cool now. We teach some of those same things today. And I've seen other players that, hey, we're going to run this play. And for me, it triggers back to something I did in high school, but now we've got kids in Florida and Georgia who know, and we, know the same actions. And it's pretty cool to see how that connects through time.
How about that? That's a small town in Illinois. Isn't Illinois do they claim to have the
original March Madness
playoffs?
Yeah, the original March Madness. So that was always fun. Then I was fortunate to go to WashU University in St. Louis and play for Coach Edwards. And, WashU is such a great academic school that, to be honest, I don't think I had any idea what I was getting into academically. But basketball wise, it was the absolute perfect place to learn how to be a coach, which I knew going into to college that was my goal. I wanted to be a coach, and Coach Edwards is the greatest mentor I could ever have. And for someone who was not a good player at the college level, his treatment of all of his players and what I learned from him, impacts my life every day on a daily basis. And so, I know he retired recently, and we were able to get back a couple years ago, and the number of lives that he's impacted it's really invigorating to see as a coach the how many people you impact and what they can go, the things they remember about the things that you taught them. It just makes me feel so fortunate to be in this profession.
How about that? Why though? So Corey mentioned it from the other side, coaching against Coach Edwards. You say this guy's brilliant, right? He's a basketball mastermind, but you're a player there for 4 years, and you're talking about the human side, the mentoring side. How did he do it? What was so special about that? How do you describe either a moment that changed you or just throughout that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was number one, he cared and loved all his players. And, and I thought what I recognized, again, not being one of the best players, is that he treated those of us who didn't play as much as the guy who was the leading scorer in the game. And there was never, so that relationship, it wasn't like a hierarchy of, oh, these are my guys. And that always stood out to me, is the impact he had. And then the other thing was how basketball is just one component of your life. But you can learn so much from it and transfer it to other areas of your life. And, I remember like he would call himself a professor of competition, and how that would then transcend into whatever you did. You could go back to that. And how when we were playing basketball, I remember he said, like, it's the most important thing while you're doing it. Basketball's, but it's not the most important thing that you do. And so like when you're engaged in it, you are all in, but that's not what you do all the time. Then you're going to go to class, and then you're going to go and do and that's why so many of his players have been successful in so many fields, I think.
Gotcha. That's a good way to put it. The professor of competition, and basketball is that important when you're doing it. I like it.
After playing and learning so many things from him, what kind of, when you went to coach, you ended up going what route did you end up going first? I know you're in high school now, but what route?
Yeah, I've been in high school my entire life, which, I've thought about that a lot, those nights when you lose a game and you're thinking about, you can't sleep, and it's like, what got me to this path? Because the largest impact of my life was my college coach, but I always wanted to coach high school, because I think that, I guess you can have I felt like you can have an impact on more players. But then I also look back, and Coach Edwards, I think, has helped me get every job that I've ever had. He's had a direct influence on. And so my first job was at CBC High School in St. Louis under Bobby McCormick, who has had some great players. Right when I was graduating, Larry Hughes was just leaving CBC. And so they had, we had multiple Division I players my first year as a coach. We coached against David Lee, was our big rival at Chaminade, and he was in high school. And so, that was my first real game planning experience, was breaking down, on an old VCR, David Lee and where he got his touches and how we could guard him. So that was kind of my first stop.
So what did you do? How did you stop David Lee? There's some coaches out there, because we tried to do it on the AAU circuit and it was a struggle, but what did you do? Did you force him right? Did you keep him off the board?
Yeah, I mean, he was left-handed. He was kind of ambidextrous, but he was better going to his left. And so we when you tried to limit his touches in the paint and force him to play on the perimeter, and back then the game was much more clogged, and it was a lot more 3-out, 2-in. You could dig and help a little bit easier. You didn't have as long of rotations. And I remember we beat them twice, 2 out of 3 times during the year, and we were in Missouri. It's districts is the first thing, and so we were in their district. We were planning on playing for a district championship, and they got upset in the semifinals, and we didn't have to play them. And we ended up winning the district and advancing to the Elite 8, where we played Vashon, who was ranked like in the top 10 USA Today. And they beat us in a close game, where I still remember our guard we were down like 2 with a minute to go, and had a turnover in the backcourt, and then had to foul, and the game was over. But it was just, one of those, like, I was so fortunate that Coach McCormick gave me a lot of, I was young, and he gave me a lot of freedom to coach and responsibility and game planning and watching film. And so that was something I learned early on.
How about that? The St. Louis Hoops. You mentioned
Yeah.
Larry Hughes, David Lee, schools like Vashon. So you see, that's if you're not from that area, it doesn't necessarily go national. People aren't that conscious of it. So that's some good name dropping, as we like to do, and highlighting the level of hoops.
It was a great way to learn. And then I was so fortunate because I was just a baby. You know, I thought I knew a lot about basketball, but I really had no clue. And I was 25 years old, and I remember Coach Edwards saying, "Hey, if you're interested in moving, there's a job in Winter Park, Florida, at Trinity Prep, that is looking for a coach." And the connection, again, it's you want to be really good at your craft, but you know, having the right contacts has always helped me. And the headmaster of the school was Craig Mon, who went to WashU when Coach Edwards was there. And so he called up Coach. He's like, "Hey, you know, do you know of any young coaches that could kind of turn our program around?" And Trinity Prep had just built a new gym. And in Florida, you know, football was king for sure, but they were wanting to kind of get basketball going. And so they took a flyer on me, you know, this young kid from St. Louis, and I went down with a lot of energy and passion, and dove right in, and had the time of my life coaching at Trinity Prep in Florida.
I've got two questions on that, and I'll let you answer one and then ask the other. But the first one is, you know, after playing and being with such a successful coach in high school and college, and then being an assistant with such a good coach in such a good area, how was it sliding over 6 inches? What was the big change and the big moment you realized, hey, it's a little different?
Well, I mean, it was really how you realize you don't know a lot. And when you got to it's easy to make suggestions, but when you got to make the final decision, it's a whole different deal when that weight comes on your shoulders. I know, you know, that Chuck Daly has a great line when he was with the Magic, when I went down there, and he talks about at the end of the game, you know, with the assistant coaches, and they'd be saying things, and he would say, "Hey, you know, take off your coat and let's look at your armpit." And he's like, "There's a reason I got way more sweat here than you guys do." And he's like, "When you make that slide over, it changes more than you realize." And I was young and naive, and you know, I loved it. You know, my first assistant coach was Stan Pitkavich, who played at Auburn, played in the NBA, was a legend in Orlando, Florida. And so I went, you know, with this guy with all this knowledge that everyone I met is like, "Oh, Stan is the greatest guy ever." And now I'm trying to tell Stan how we want to run our program. I'm like, I don't know if the dominoes are in the right order here, but Stan was a great mentor as well, and helped me meet a lot of people. You know, and starting out, I think, as most coaches do, we did a lot of the things we did at WashU, and we ran swing offense, and there's things I was familiar with. And then over time, we kind of offensively, we adapted to a different style of play where we started using more space. We went and kind of did some Princeton stuff where we got there by accident because we were really good late in games when we had spread teams out, and it was like, well, why don't we start doing this more often? And started playing, you know, 4 out with our post player at the nail, and giving a lot of freedom on the wings, and so that gave me, you know, a new kind of avenue to pursue. When I was in Orlando, I was so lucky that Rollins College Division II is in town. And Tom Klusman is a legend who I would say has impacted me coaching wise almost as much as anyone. And he took me under his wing, and, you know, I'd work his camps, I'd hang around, and they play all zone. And so he and his zones are a bit unorthodox. Exactly. Like a true 2-1-2 where you go
half court.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we actually implemented that at Trinity Prep, and we did his full zone packages. And, you know, he might have missed, violated a couple NCAA rules on occasion by coming to our practice and showing our guys how they can improve what they were doing. But it was just a great relationship to learn from him. And so we started playing like Princeton on offense and zone on defense, and winning a lot of games. I also, at the time, through Stan Pitkavich, started coaching AAU basketball. and we were through a Nike Team Florida program. And so I got to work with some really high level players there, and got to meet a lot of people, which kind of led me to my next job.
How different was it from St. Louis to Florida? We talk a lot of Georgia, Florida hoops because that's where me and Searle are mostly based out of, but we know other areas, and St. Louis is real good basketball. How different was it going to Orlando?
The level of athleticism was much higher in Orlando, and the other thing which looking back, and for me growing up, that college basketball was always like, you wanted to be like Bobby Knight, or you wanted to be like Norm Stewart. And that was like the prototype. Well, in Orlando, it was all about the NBA because the Magic were in town and there was no major college. And so everyone was wanting to be Penny and Shaq. And so when the kids in Orlando, they were watching NBA games. In St. Louis, kids were watching college games. And so the point of reference, I think, of where players and coaches were kind of came from different perspectives was one thing I noticed. And, and football was so important. So you had this level of athleticism. Sometimes I felt it was a little bit rawer than, I think the coaches dictated more control in the Midwest than down in Florida for sure.
So Nike Team Florida, what years were those? What were some players that you might have had there? Were you with the younger groups or with the
so we started out with 16s and then did 16s and a 17s group. And so we had like Jeremiah Rivers, Tyrone Cornell, AJ Tyler went to Clemson, Francis Saee went to Auburn. The year behind us was Nick Calathis, who went to Florida, was Mr. Basketball. Chandler Parsons went to Florida, had a good NBA career. Walter Hodge was a year ahead of us. Keith Brumbaugh was a McDonald's All-American a year ahead of us. So that was kind of the groups that I was with.
There you go. You follow Calathis at all anymore as he wins the
he had quite a career. He has the dual citizenship, and he's benefited by being the Greek citizenship. And I know a few years ago we got back, and he actually played with a manager of mine at Winter Park. Was in the tournament, and had Nikki playing for him in the tournament. That is a big deal. And so they had a really neat team there, and they had Jason Williams and Mike Bibby. You were all on it. And so my old manager Juan Bernal is a basketball junkie and started connecting all these guys together, and it was pretty fun to watch them connect and play in that thing.
How about that? All right. Well, you mentioned Rivers, you mentioned Winter Park. Take us there and talk about the difference between coaching the AAU and coaching the high school too.
Yeah, I mean, it was like trial by fire. And it was for me as a coach, the AAU was a great thing because you got to coach so many games and put yourself in so many situations. And so you're playing 6 games in a weekend, and over the summer you're playing 50 60 games between April and through the summer. That got me a lot of coaching chops, just when to call timeouts, how to rotate guy, all those little things that you just need, how to draw up a play, different situations. The one I always remember, speaking of name dropping, is we were playing up here in Atlanta, actually at Sewanee, in a tournament against Steph Curry's AAU team. And Dell was coaching his team, and Steph was really good, but he wasn't the best player on the team. They had a kid that was going to Wake Forest, I think, or Syracuse. And Steph was the little guard, and we came down and went to overtime. And I remember Stan was coaching with me and Dell, and I remember Stan joking to Dell, like, hey, why don't we just have a shootout to see who wins before going to overtime? And I thought it was kind of surreal. Like, here I am, this little guy from Illinois. But in overtime, we had the ball down 2 and called our last timeout with like 12 seconds left. And we drew up a play. We're going to get, come off this ball screen. And they came out in the zone. And we didn't tell our kids what to do if it was a zone. And so we passed it around, threw up a wild shot. We lose by 2. But I've always remembered how Del Curry in that game against us hadn't played zone the entire game. And that situation went to it. And as a coach, I learned a lot because I did not prepare our guys. Like, if they come out in the zone, we do this. If their man, do this. We were just like, hey, here's what we're going to run. And then, so that was one that I remember from that on the other side, I played zone in a few of those situations before from that, and always think back to that game. So the AAU was a great way to learn and to coach higher level players in a different way. because we tried to game plan. We were one of the few teams, I think, that tried to do that, but it's hard when you're not practicing very much. And there were times where we had a guy travel with us, and he would go watch the teams we had to play and then come in. And so we at least tried to have some sense. We'd have, so one assistant coach wouldn't be on our bench, would be out watching the other teams, and it kind of gave us a little advantage. But I was able through it to meet the Rivers family, and a blessing that you see things that at the time Coach Rivers was with the Magic and got let go early in the season with the Magic, and so he didn't have a team for the first time in his life, and so got to be around his sons more, and we beat Winter Park that year at the small private school against the big public school. And after the year, that summer, they had a coaching transition. And I remember, Coach Rivers saying, "Hey, I want you to coach, my son at Winter Park." And, that was a confidence thing for me. It was like, all right, I've at least somebody, hopefully, somebody that knows what they're talking about recognizes that I can maybe bring something to the table. It was also really hard to leave a school that gave me a chance, and I loved it. And we had a lot of success and overachieved. And, those first group of players I coached at Trinity, it's really neat that even now they're all in their early to mid 30s. And through COVID, one of the benefits, we've been able to do bi-weekly Zoom calls. So for a year with those guys, they're all over the country now. We get on Zoom at night and catch up and talk about the NBA playoffs, and they've got kids now. And so it's really neat, again, the impact that they've had on me, and hopefully I've given a little bit to them. And it was the hardest thing to leave them to go across town to the big public school. So now you go to a school, you got 3,000 kids in the high school, and big time players, who are getting recruited from the time you walk in.
And how do you adjust? You talked about it a little bit with the AAU part, but how do you adjust going from Trinity to Winter Park to the big names to the, and I'll say it in theory, but the better athletes, right?
For sure. They were better athletes, more and had higher ceilings for sure. It was to make them reach their potential, and they had a passion to play, but the mindset was different because they wanted to play college basketball. At Trinity, our kids wanted to be successful high school players, and they cared really about winning games and being a great team. And at Winter Park, I felt we were a stepping stone to the next step on their basketball journey, which was great to see a different perspective. And the kids were awesome. I love those kids and stay in touch with them. A couple of them live up here in Atlanta, been our locker room talking to our kids at Pisgah. But at first, I was young. I was 28, 29 years old, and thought like, oh, I've got this figured out. Like, we went in, we turned this program around, we won games, we spread them out on offense, we played zone on defense. So day one, we started doing that at Winter Park, and defensively, we were not very good in the same zones that we were. It didn't translate over. The level of athlete, the size was different. And so offensively, we still use a lot of spacing and really got better at the Princeton offense. We were lucky that the one kid, Jeremiah Rivers, was a junior my first year, and he was playing with USA Basketball. He was getting recruited by everybody, and after his recruitment process, ended up committing to Georgetown when John Thompson III was there, running Princeton. And so all of a sudden I had somebody that could answer my questions when we got into issues like, how do we overcome this? And their staff was great. And so offensively, we were really, really proficient at Winter Park. Like those videos, even today, like we were really fun to watch and had a lot of success by really, I think, playing the right way, which a lot of the teams at that level was much more up and down and aggressive. And we didn't play that way, and had great success in doing, and kind of had some of those picture perfect baskets and set people up to get the layups, and it showcased our kids' skill set, and most of them ended up going and playing in college, which was great.
That's good stuff. So when you leave Winter Park, how did that kind of go down? Because now you're going back, closer to home. So how did that go down?
It was an apples to oranges thing. Like we got beat in the state final my last year at Winter Park. And we had a core group of Jeremiah Rivers and Francis IE and John Pikavich, who were this players that like you'd love to, you're so blessed to coach them because they work so hard and great kids. But we had some young kids, Jordan Bolton and Kyle McClanahan, who could flat out play. And then Jeremiah had a younger brother, Austin, who is, possibly the top ranked middle school player in the country. And so I remember when I interviewed so Coach Edwards again calls up and he says, hey, if you're looking to get back in the area, there's a job that's opened up that I think that would be a good fit. And it's MICDS, which was started by the same people that started WashU. There's a lot of kind of connections there. But as it was a football school and had, 6 football championships, I think. And basketball wise was at a solid level, but was not at a, not having the success I think they wanted. And they had a legendary coach, Don Maurer, who was great, who was transitioning over to be the AD. And so he's like, hey, if you're interested. And so at the time in Florida, I just had a daughter was born in the middle of our season. So my daughter, Chloe, was, 3 months old at the time. And it's like, here's a chance that I could move back, be around my family who was 2 hours away in Illinois, coach in a different environment. And I felt like the WashU of the high school basketball scene. And I said, I've experienced different things, but I thought like, I want to recreate that. And so I remember the night when I flew up to St. Louis to interview, working out at Rollins College with Coach Klusman. I'm like, we've got it going. Because we had, I was working out Austin Rivers upstairs on a court, and we were working out, all the time. And we had guys at like 4 different baskets doing different things in the spring. And I remember driving Austin home that day, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to the airport. I'm going up. And he's like, you're never going to leave me, are you, Coach? I'm like, no, there's no way I'm leaving you. And I remember like that conversation. And then once I got up there, it was like, it felt like the right thing to do. And to tell him and his mom, Chris, who was the one down there, I remember like that was so hard because I knew he was special, and I thought egotistically I could help him reach his dreams. And he was getting ready. It's hard to leave the #1 player in the country and to go to a place that wasn't 500. And that's what I decided to do because I felt it philosophically for my family that it was the right thing to do. And, Coach Edwards left Washington State University under George Raveling to go back to WashU and restart the program when they didn't have a team and started from nothing. And his stories about building that I always thoroughly enjoyed. And so I'm like, all right, here's my chance to kind of do a similar type thing. So that led me back to MICDS.
This is coaches and people listening and watching are going to say, lots of respect to you, Coach Hixenbaugh, but also this guy's crazy leaving that one spot with #1 player in the nation coming up. How about it? But it's philosophical, and that Mark Edwards connection story.
And the school, and again, as a basketball coach, I love it, but I also realize like it's an extracurricular activity. Like what you do during the school day is really the job. And they transfer back and forth. I always think that I'm a coach in the classroom and a teacher on the court. And MICDS is such a respected academic institution, and I wanted that challenge to teach in that on a daily basis, and to try to again recreate the kind of the WashU experience at the high school level. And so it was apples and oranges, and but it was it's about a bigger picture than just coaching the best kids and winning games, for sure.
So give us your best Doc Rivers story.
Oh,
okay. I mean, you got to have a good Doc Rivers story. I mean, I've always heard he's kind of a character.
He is
in a good way. In a good way.
He's. I mean, he is a one of the all-time great dads that you could have. If all of the dads I coached was like him, coaching would be a much better profession. Because he was always supportive, and he, it was weird because he's living in Boston, coaching the Celtics, and we're in Orlando, and so he would fly back as much as he could to see our games. But he was just so happy to see his kids. Like he was never critical. I remember the All-Star break was always fun because he would come back and I would go over one day and we would talk X's and O's, and we would, it was, and he would always treat me as an equal basketball wise.
Cool.
I remember there was an inbounds play that we ran that he stole. And then the first time I saw Kevin Garnett run it in a game, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, where they would have a fake handoff and then he would spin baseline. And that was really cool.
Did they call it Winter Park?
Yeah. But it was, but the fact that he respected me and we would talk, pick and roll defense. And he was like, hey, have you ever thought of doing this? But it was never like, I know more than you. He was just a great guy to talk to. He has his ability to relate to every person, is phenomenal, and to this day, I respect him so much as a person more than and he's a great coach. He's a world champion coach, but there's a reason that players love playing for him. And he's always been great to me. I mean, there's been the Celtics would do training camp and at Rollins College, so they would have the draft, and then those guys would come down right after the draft before their summer league was in Orlando at the time. And so he would always have us in at their practices, and you're seeing the draft picks, and him and Danny Ainge are talking, and like it was he pulled the curtain. He had no problem pulling the curtain back. I think story wise, the best stories he connected to me were more as a dad than as a coach. And I remember, I think it was Austin or his youngest son, Spencer, is the basketball junkie of the family. And I remember when he was coaching the Magic, and one of them was like the ball boy for a game. And he would always tell the story of how, at timeout, they come up and Doc's in there drawing on the huddle, and Austin's like pulling on his coat saying, Dad, can I get $5 to go buy some popcorn? And it's the middle of an NBA game. And it's just like those real world dad experiences were the things that I remember the most. And about always what was important. It wasn't winning the games. It was getting the best out of kids and putting them in position to deal with adversity and learn from it and grow from it. And, I remember when I was in St. Louis, this is a classic Doc story, that I took a couple kids down that were freshmen for me, and we're trying to build the culture. And so I had two kids, McPherson Moore, who ended up playing at Emory, and Michael Scott came. We flew down, spent a week in Orlando, and Coach Rivers worked them out. Here's an NBA head coach, and we're working out in the 9th grade gym at Winter Park High School with no air conditioning in July. So it's 110 degrees, and he's working out these 9th graders from St. Louis like he's getting ready for, the NBA draft with them. And I remember afterwards, as we're sitting talking and they're dying, he runs down to 7-Eleven and comes back with all these Gatorades for everybody. I mean, just, things like that is pretty special.
How did you leave Winter Park? And we'll move to St. Louis here in a minute, but how did you leave Winter Park and keep all those relationships that strong, that you were going back and using the 9th grade gym the next year and the year after, right?
I mean, I think it was that I was trying to be transparent. I love those kids. I stayed in touch with them. The first year I left, it was humbling that we went 6-20 or something. We were bad. We started playing freshmen, and Winter Park went to the Final Four. And I remember I flew back to watch them in the Final Four. I didn't want any of the players to know I was back, so I flew back, sat in the stands, and then after the game, they got beat in the Final Four, but then went down and talked to them as they were going to the bus. And I think, it's just those relationships with the kids. Like, I love those kids, and I try to help them get to college, stay in touch with them, just as it is now with the kids back in St. Louis. That when you leave, you're leaving, and it's hard for them to relate, that it's nothing about them, that, that you want the best for them. But it's a business, and it's a family, and I'm an educator, and there's this tough decisions have to be made.
How with going to St. Louis now you're kind of back to where you went to college. You had the unbelievable relationship with Rollins, where you had no previous relationship.
Right.
Now coming back, were you able to immediately jump in and kind of get that same relationship?
Yeah, I mean, the UAA is great. They play on Fridays and Sundays, so I could be at every Sunday home game. Was part of our family. My daughter went to school at WashU preschool. I lived like three minutes away, and so it was, for me, it was super cool. Like, I could go pick up or like get there early for picking her up from preschool and walk down the coach's office and just hang out for 20 minutes. And she would, she could run around the gym, and like just those types of things were very important to me. I know not to every coach is that the case, but to me, it was great. The players I played with were still around. We would get together, watch WashU games. I was fortunate. I got a couple of old WashU players to be my assistant coaches. It was really, for me, it was special because I had such a good experience, and I got to kind of keep that going. And I'm a huge believer in D3 basketball because of my experience, and I love going to those games and watching them practice. And Coach was always just welcoming. He'd share knowledge and playbook and stories and anything I'd ask for. He was always there to help. And to this day, if you have a big question or a life decision, I know I'm not the only one who calls him up and says, "Coach, help me out here."
We had Jason Zimmerman on from Emory a couple weeks back, and he was singing the praises of D3 also, as you do right now. How do you think some of these approaches, relationships, not relationships so much, but the way you approach the decisions, can it happen at the Division I level where it is, you don't have that hierarchy of people where you're treating the 13th guy on the bench the same way?
Yeah.
Does that happen at JUCO, Corey? Does that happen at D1? Can you only do it at D3? What do you guys think?
You want to go first, Corey, or do you want me to?
I think it can happen anywhere, but I do think it has to be done a little different. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of egos sometimes that can get in the way, and other titles and even rules. In junior college, for me to give a guy a ride back to the dorm is not a violation, whereas it would be in Division I, and that might be a time for me and whoever to talk a little bit and build a relationship. Little things like that can get hindered. I still think at the end of the day, being genuine is being genuine. And I do think you get a lot of relationships with that. And, I always keep up with every guy, and it's corny, but I always post a happy birthday for every player that's ever played for me. It allows them to call me or me to call them after it. And that keeps a relationship going. You could do that no matter where you were at. But there are some things I know that would hinder it a little bit, I know.
Yeah,
what's your thoughts?
I think that's great, Corey. And I think there's a lot of ways to make par as a coach, and coaches prioritize things in a different way. And there's definitely coaches who prioritize winning. But I think there are very successful coaches who prioritize relationships at every level. I think in the NBA, I think, Monty Williams right now, I mean, those guys, what they're doing for him in Phoenix, and that is all relationship established, I think. So I think you can see it at every level, but as Corey said, I think there's way more hurdles, and for me, I never had that desire to kind of go through those steps at the college level, partly because I thought, maybe after going to WashU, what I thought of basketball was I had a different perspective because that's my experience. And I know at the Division I level, I've coached a lot of kids there. I have a lot of friends that have coached at that level, and they have great relationships. But it is different because it is much more of a job when you're going to Division I than Division III, I think. And there's a little bit more pressure on those coaches to win games, even if they're all about relationships. But you can find, this is in any industry and business, there's successful people who do things in different ways and how they prioritize.
Well, you think about it, Searle, with us working for Hebs, all the Georgia Tech guys that were Bobby Crimmins, they would run in front of a car for that guy, whether they were Kenny Anderson or a walk-on. And you saw that in the 30 for 30 with Valvano.
Yeah.
Those guys said, now granted, they won national championship together, but the unbelievable, that felt like a table that any of us would sit at with our teams or former teams we played with. Yeah. And that was the highest level, I
don't want to jump in, but Valvano, I think that's a tremendous thing. And, I was very fortunate when I was at WashU, the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research. I spent a summer as an intern for them in Raleigh. And it was, and I kind of cold called them like, hey, I want to be a basketball guy. And they didn't really have an intern position, but they created one, and I got college credit for spending the summer. And Coach Valvano's wife, Pam, was really heavily involved. And so my job, though, was to try to get college football coaches and basketball coaches. That was back when everyone did their coaching show on the weekend, to get them to do Jimmy V, like free commercial slots on it. And then we had a big celebrity golf tournament that we kind of got ready for. That I remember Charles Barkley was in it, and he was awesome. But Hootie and the Blowfish had a concert the night before. And when Charles came to tee off the next morning, he was in the same outfit that he left the concert in the night before. But
there you go. No surprise there, but
yeah,
perfectly weaved in. We just got Hootie and the Blowfish and Charles Barkley, and with the Jimmy V charity.
The coach, like Coach K, was on and was in town, so he would come by, and when they would have the meetings of the board, the people who were on it, and the impact that Coach Valvano made with his old players and what people were willing to do for him, Dick Vitale, all the things they've done. And to kind of see that when it was just starting is when I did it. And we had an office in the upstairs of a banking building in Cary, North Carolina. And I was sleeping at the fraternity house at North Carolina State for free. And
sublet, yep.
Yeah, going playing pickup games at Reynolds Coliseum at night. And, I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but the impact that those coaches have, I mean, people love them for a reason.
How about that? That's a great, see, that was not on our checklist of the off the beaten path. You just took another little turn for us. And Coach, you're back in St. Louis. Your daughter's running around the WashU court. Coach Edwards is there. The relationships are deep, and you leave. You come to Atlanta. Why do you do that? What happens? How does that opportunity come up to transition over here?
There's a variety of things that led to that. Primarily, it was a new challenge where, and again, a lot of it's off the court, where when I moved to Atlanta, outside of basketball, I've moved in administration and out of the classroom. And that was a challenge I wanted to take from an educational perspective. Back in St. Louis, Coach Edwards wasn't the coach anymore. And so Pat's there now, and he's awesome. I mean, he was the right guy for the job. And, he still welcomes us home when I go back and around the gym, which is really cool. But, Coach was, it wasn't the same coach it wasn't your coach going in the office. John Shale, the AD, retired, so it was different people, and they're great. And I'm glad to be a part of it. But it was also different. And so I was ready for a new challenge. My daughter was in middle school. She was ready for something new. It was just, again, through knowing people that there was a contact with that said, hey, if you're willing. And for a couple of years, I kind of had some feelers out and interviewed for a couple jobs in different places. And I thought I had the best job in St. Louis, because, again, the balancing, everything, all the pieces to it. But outside of St. Louis. So if I was going to move, it was going to be out of the area. And so I got lucky that the pieces fell in, and Mount Pisgah had the basketball position and administrative position open at the same time. And I really loved the people at the school when I interviewed. And there'd been, a couple other jobs where I remember one job that was a really high profile job in Indiana. And I remember meeting with the AD when I was getting ready to leave. And he's like, the problem is we don't know if we offer you the job, if you'll take it. And I remember saying, that's right. I don't. And I didn't know. I'm like, I know I'm not getting that job. It wasn't the right one. Where here, when I was getting in the car to go back to the airport, I'm like, that's the right fit for me at this time in my life. I just, I felt that, and haven't regretted it for one day.
But before you tell us about more here in Atlanta, how did you end up? Because your first year you were 6-20.
Yeah.
And I want, everybody doesn't know your path to know your story. How did it end there? We know it, but we
never won a state championship. We never got, we had success, and, we built and ended up with a program that, we had success, like conference basketball. We were in the oldest conference in the state of Missouri. And when I got there, I think they'd won the conference twice in like from the 20s is when it started. I mean, we won like 7 and 10 years. And so we had success, but we weren't winning state championship success, which is fine. But you always, I wish we would have kind of broken through and got to the state championship, and we would always run up and against a really, lost some just tough games, competitive games along the way to really good players. And, you need a little luck to do that. And our players were, I loved them. They were great. And we had a program in place, but I also felt we were a little, I felt stagnant. It's like we knew what we did. We'd go to this team camp in June. This is what our off-season workouts were like. Like, it's just kind of very cyclical. And I was ready.
All right. So now tell us your first days in Atlanta. Now you've teamed up with Rollins and Orlando at 2 different places. You teamed with Washington, which you already had a relationship with. So do you team with anybody in Atlanta, or is Atlanta too big and too?
Right now we're much more like, Atlanta's been great, but we're more on our own up here in Johns Creek, and our guys are gym rats. And from the time I walked in, they love being in the gym. And so we didn't need to really motivate them. We just needed to get them on the same page and get them a little bit better every day. And we had just a great group. And so we got right at it. And my first summer, I moved down here on June 1st. And so we had the whole summer together and played in the fall league and got to the season. And I didn't know what to expect, really, because it was very different. They didn't know what to expect because I did things very differently. We started emphasizing film study and game prep much more, I think, than they had been used to. And so there was a learning curve as far as expectations of how we go about our business. And we kind of had to find a meeting place, but we had talented kids that wanted to get better. And we were fortunate. My first year, we had some success and got off to a good start, won a couple close games early. I remember we beat BT, who's a big, Catholic school in the area. I don't think Mount Pisgah had ever beaten. We beat them, but we came down, we were up 1 possession game late. They called timeout. And I remember saying, like, hey, 3 or 4 times in the couple games we scouted, or I guess we'd seen them twice because it was early in the year, that they out of a timeout, they run this little flare action for their point guard, who is their best player. And so if they do that, we're going to switch this. And we switched it and got a steal on it, and that sealed the game. And I remember our kids in the locker room like, hey, this stuff really works. And so, you had to have something to get them to, like, they were fully on board, but then they were all bought in. And then they're watching film on their own, and we're filming practice, and they're talking about making reads, and it's a completely different system than they had done. And, and we had a good run. St. Francis was in our region, and they beat us twice during the regular season. We play them in a region final. They beat us again. So we get to the state tournament. And for me, this is one difference in Georgia than I didn't have in Missouri. Is in Missouri, once you lose, it's over. And so you have, you can be 2 of the top 3 teams in the state. And when you meet in the round of 16, that's what it is. We're here, we were region runner-ups, but you still advanced to the state tournament. So that gave us some life, and we advanced to the Final Four and played St. Francis for the 4th time, and had 2 free throws 2 different times, shot free throws in the last 2 minutes to tie it, and just couldn't get over the hump against them. So got beat to a really good team, well-coached team with great players, great athletes. They win the championship, by 20, no problem, on cruise control. And it motivated our guys, like, all right, we can get this done. We lost only 1 senior off that team. And so we have a nucleus with high expectations for sure.
And then here comes the story. Not only do you win a state championship, but how you win it. I mean, I know there's a lot of work that maybe we're skipping here, but you win the state championship. It wasn't a 20-point blowout. It wasn't holding on, making some free throws. Give it to us.
It was a fitting conclusion to this crazy year, right, with COVID. So you couldn't relax the whole year, because I'm like, wow, we're really good. And at any point in time, we could get shut down. And if you get the wrong guy, go down at the wrong time. And, our guys, we didn't have one player playing every game of the season this year for a variety of reasons. But it allowed us to have some depth. But when we had a good run, and we, we won the region. That was for us a big game, was beating St. Francis in the region final in pretty dominating fashion. Like, we controlled the game from the tip, won by 18 or 20, and really were never challenged. And so that kind of was the breakthrough for our guys, was beating St. Francis. And it's the second time we beat them, but in a big game, we kind of had a tough route, but we handled business until the championship game. And then, you're playing in Macon. You got this great broadcasting crew on the game. And we play our worst game of the year, and everything we want to do, we don't do. And it reminds me back to Coach Carrill, who I always looked up to and was able to kind of connect through and a lot of his players. But I remember what he told Sidney Johnson, who's out at was a head coach at Princeton, that played for him on the he was on the team that beat UCLA, became the head coach at Princeton, was an assistant at Georgetown, and I've had a good relationship. And Sidney, I remember telling me, he's like, Coach Carrill would always say, as a coach, what you do is you prepare, you have the ultimate game plan, you prepare for every single situation, and then you got plan B. And the good coaches know when you stay with plan A and when to go to plan B. The bad coaches stay with A too long, or they go to plan B too early. He's like, once you figure that out, it's all fine. And I was thinking that in that state championship game, like, everything we're trying to do isn't working. We couldn't make a shot. We were in foul trouble. We couldn't play the guys we wanted to play. And it was just like, we're just trying to survive to keep it close, that maybe we can go on a run. And we ended up kind of subbing differently down this. We were down 8 with 2 minutes to go. And finally get a putback. And we never make a first shot because we shot 27% for the game. But we got a putback basket. We get a turnover. We get we get fouled on a putback, our big guy, Nate Gordon. So he makes both free throws. We're able to sub in to get a pressing team. We steal the inbounds pass and score. And so now it went from 8 to 2 pretty quick. And so now it's a 2-point game with a minute to go. We have a freshman in the game who hadn't played the whole game, we subbed in the press, and Tyson Pittman's running around in an unexpected situation. And we get another turnover with like 40 seconds left. So now we've got the ball down 40 seconds to go, come down, miss again. Just that, JoJo Peterson got a good shot, a little runner down the lane against their zone. They knock it out of bounds. So we talked about, this is where, we were prepared, and we said on baseline inbounds, we felt that we could get space to get our post touch directly off the inbounds. So they're like, do you want a timeout? Like, no, just run our stuff. It's going to look right. For me, run it. And we get a basically a little 4-foot jump hook to tie the game with 23 seconds to go. They come down, and they're holding for one shot, as well they should. And then Cash Grady just makes a great play. He kind of ices the screen to keep them on the one side, and as they're splitting, steals it with 5.2 seconds on the clock. Not that we've watched this a few times, but
never.
It's the fact that our kid Cash Grady had the mindset that once he gets to steal, to be aware of the clock and where he can get. And so he's going up the court, and he ends up pulling up with his foot on the 3-point line in front of our bench and releasing it where it goes through as the horn sounding. And like, if he'd have tried to get to the layup, he probably wouldn't have got off in time. But his internal clock and court awareness of getting a steal, not panicking, not holding the ball, not throwing it away, and then makes the shot to win a state championship. And it was like out of a movie. It was out of a movie.
You had no business. Winning that if you're looking at the numbers.
I mean, I've won a lot. I'm old now, so I've won a lot of games in my career, and I don't know if I've ever won a game where we shot below 30% as a team, and the other team shot over twice as many free throws as we did, and somehow we were able to do it.
There you go. And you're a numbers guy, so Coach, we could keep talking forever. We say this almost every podcast. Such great stories. Let's move into our lightning round and. Okay. Finish out strong, finish out quick. And part of the question there, shot clock coming to the state of Georgia for high school. Yes or no? Did you vote for it?
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait. I love it.
All right. And turkeys, what are turkeys in your
Yeah.
basketball world?
Yeah, for us, our turkeys are 3 stops in a row. So we got it. I don't know who I stole that from, but it was, just like you get a turkey in bowling when you get your 3 strikes in a row. So we call them turkeys. I know different people have different names, but we really worry about turkeys for us.
All right, pick and pop or pick and roll?
Depends who you got out in the court. I'm more of a pick and pop guy now, but for the right guy, we're pick and roll.
I think we already know, but are you playing man or are you playing zone?
We've been playing man-to-man for a long time now.
All right, St. Louis, Orlando, Atlanta. Pick one right now.
Atlanta. Atlanta's home now.
Good choice. All right, Corey's got a few as we wrap it up.
All right. So in St. Louis, I guess you got to be a ribs guy. Have you had Matt's ribs down in Atlanta yet from Matt Ribs Shack?
I have.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we've got this long list. So when we moved here, we were trying to get figured out here at school, and my wife was pregnant, so we had to. So my wife was pregnant when we moved down here. Little Luna was born in November the first year. Basketball starts. COVID hits, we're in quarantine. So we've got this long list of places that we've got to try now that the world is opening up and we're a little bit more mobile. So we can't wait to try out some good ribs down here for sure.
All right. Well, give me your best barbecue place, whether it's Florida, Georgia, or Missouri or Illinois.
There's 2 in St. Louis. Salt and Smoke and Pappy's are my 2 that I love. I'll wait in line out the door for both of them.
I love it. All right, give me the first time, you've had a lot of success for coaches, and this has kind of been my new question I ask guys we have on. When was the first time you kind of got humbled as a coach? When you thought, hey, I'm pretty big time, we're winning 1 million games. Maybe it's even after the state championship, but you sit down and maybe somebody humbles you a little bit. When's one of those stories you could tell?
Well, that happens all the time, but I think that my first job when you're out there and you think, we won a big game over early in the season, and I was like, hey, this is easy. And then the next game we played a team who wasn't nearly as good, and we were flat, and I did not have our guys ready to prepare. We enjoyed the victory over the big team and weren't prepared to play the not talented team. And that humbled me about how you've got to respect every opponent every night, and you've got to prepare the same game plan regardless if you're playing the number 1 team in the state or a team who's 0-20. The effort that we're putting in to prepare for the game's got to be the same. But I learned that early on, and that's what I remember, because there'll be games now where like we should be in good shape, and every game I go into, I'm like, man, we got to do these 3 things or we don't have a chance to win. And I firmly believe that.
All right. And my last one, your podcast that you're listening to, other than ours, of course, because everybody listens to that one and has it as their favorite, but your favorite podcast out there right now.
That's what I'm gonna look to make sure I get to. I listen to a lot, and Daniels has sent me some good ones. The one recently that there's a new one that there's 2 from a standpoint. I love Sense and Scalability is a kind of obscure one that kind of gets into some details and analytics that I've really enjoyed and looks at things from a different perspective. I like the John Hollinger, Nate Duncan one on the NBA. I enjoy, like catching up on what's going on in the NBA. I enjoy that. But those are kind of 2 that, in the basketball pod. Chris Oliver, obviously, I think everybody that's kind of mainstream. But Sense and Scalability is one that I like. That's not as well known.
He's bringing in obscurity.
I like it. That's what we like. Well, we've had an unbelievable visit with you. We've enjoyed it. We like the path and just so many things you've dropped, knowledge of basketball on the court and off, dealing with kids. But kind of give us in closing, if there's anything you want to, thank anybody you want to thank or anyone
thanks for spending the time, because we all got a path and we've all got a story, and everyone's is special. But I just feel so fortunate to be in a job and a profession that I love every day, and excited to get to the gym. We're going later this afternoon with our guys, and to me that the fire's burning pretty strong to really impact these kids, because, you know, I know this is somewhat cliche, but I think it's so true. Is like, we won a state championship last year, and I told our guys, like, if that's the highlight of your life, we're not doing our job as coaches. And I said, we really won't find out how great a season that was until 15, 20 years down the road and what you're doing with your life. And now I'm getting at that part of my career where I can see the long-term success of our players and the different things that they're doing. I'm always proud when you know, I've got some guys that are into coaching now, which is really cool that you get to talk with, but you see guys that are in so many different areas of life, but the things they learned in basketball help them be successful in what they do, whether it's preparation, whether it's attention to detail, whether it's a positive, dealing with adversity, you know, all of those things that we work on a daily basis. And it's so fun to you know, learn from our kids every day. So they help me do those things. But I think, you know, basketball is the best teacher. And I say this now, I'm the head of the upper school, so I'm the principal of the high school. And I look at things from a coaching perspective, because I think for me, that's the way I can connect with people regardless. Like, we're going to have a meeting over academics, you know, later today, but my perspective is still that coaching of like, all right, how does this work? How can you reach these people? And, you know, it's the greatest game in the world to me. And everything I can owe, you know, all of my livelihood to the Little Orange basketball, which is pretty cool.
There you go. Basketball is the great teacher. Coach Matt Hixenbaugh, a champion on the court, but also, from what we've heard today, a champion of building those relationships and staying connected. Coach, we appreciate you, Corey. Let's wrap it up.
Cyril, give us our how they can reach us and find us, and then I'll close us out.
You got it. So as we come out of obscurity bit by bit, one place is social media. So Off Beaten Path on Instagram, Off Beaten Path Podcast, or our Twitter. You want to join along, Off Beaten Path with the _. Join us, follow us, like us, listen along, and great stories now and still to come.
And we really want to, you know, thank you for being on here, and thanks to those who listen. We're a show for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are in coaching, those who follow coaches, those who hire and fire the coaches, and basically anybody trying to get in this business, crazy as it may be. All right, we appreciate you listening.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, guys.